The frozen rope bit into Maya Chen's wrists as she plummeted into the glacial cavern, her body spinning through crystalline air before crashing into the underground ice pool with a thunderous splash. The shock of Arctic water drove the breath from her lungs as she sank into the obsidian depths, bound hands behind her back, feet lashed together with climbing rope. "Dead weight!" roared Instructor Kane Frost from the cavern's edge, his voice echoing off ice walls like gunshots. "This is where pretenders learn the truth about themselves. Adventurers, you know what to do. Smash that subscribe button and gear up for the ultimate survival challenge." The expedition team erupted in harsh laughter, their headlamps cutting through the blue-white darkness like prison searchlights. They pressed forward against the ice shelf, hungry for the panic, the desperate thrashing, the inevitable rescue that always came when someone was hurled bound into the legendary Devil's Pool. The Ice Cave Challenge at Mount Raven Expedition Base had broken professional climbers, Arctic guides, and endurance champions. To them, Maya would be just another casualty. For 3 brutal weeks, she had endured their whispers echoing through the mountain base corridors that she didn't belong among real adventurers. That she was wasting a slot meant for someone tougher, more experienced, more male. Her gear always too pristine, her techniques too textbook, her silence mistaken for inexperience. She had worn invisibility like Arctic camouflage, but invisibility couldn't keep her afloat in sub-zero water. Frost's ice cleats scraped against the cavern floor as he paced like a predator. He offered no instructions because there were none. The challenge was primitive: survive or be dragged out unconscious. From the cruel grin carved across his weathered face, he had already written Maya's epitaph. 30 seconds max, muttered expedition member Jake Rivers. The others chuckled, their breath forming ghost clouds in the freezing air. Artificial LED floods blazed down from the cavern ceiling, reflecting mercilessly off the ice pool's surface, as if the mountain itself was betting against her survival. But beneath the surface, Maya's world crystallized into perfect clarity. Liquid ice wrapped around her chest like steel bands, pulling her back to a memory she rarely allowed to surface. Alaska, age 14, a fishing boat capsizing in the Bering Sea. Crew members laughing as she struggled in churning black water. She had nearly died then, until her grandfather's voice returned like an anchor. Panic is the enemy. Ice is just another element to master. She opened her eyes underwater, watching silver bubbles escape in a steady stream toward the distant surface. This was no different than any other survival scenario. Chin tucked, shoulders rotated to create slack in the rope, lungs burning, but her pulse remaining controlled and measured. Above, the laughter began to falter. The expedition team expected chaos, thrashing, immediate surrender. Instead, the pool's surface remained ominously still, disturbed only by the gentle movement of escaping air. "Where the hell is she?" someone whispered nervously. Frost folded his arms, confidence wavering. "She's finished," he muttered, though doubt crept into his voice like frost through cracks. At the far side of the ice shelf, expedition leader Colonel Rex Storm raised his tactical tablet, stylus moving in precise strokes across the screen. He wasn't watching for panic or failure. He was measuring something entirely different, something the others couldn't comprehend. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Every head turned toward the pool, every smirk beginning to freeze into uncertainty. The underground chamber glittered like a crystal cathedral under the harsh lights. The laughter that had greeted her fall had crystallized into something sharper, more brittle, nervous energy that cut through the Arctic air. A dozen expedition members leaned forward, their shadows falling across the ice like dark prophecies, waiting for panic that refused to come. Frost forced his predatory smile, arms crossed over his chest, but the muscle twitch at his jaw betrayed his growing unease. Dead weight, he told himself. The Devil's Pool always claimed its victims. But at the far end, Storm stood silent as stone, his tactical tablet glowing against the cavern's blue light, stylus scratching methodical notes. The stopwatch on his wrist ticked with mechanical patience. He wasn't recording failure. He was recording endurance. Maya's world narrowed to pressure and rhythm beneath the ice. Liquid cold squeezed her chest, but her mind remained diamond sharp, counting heartbeats instead of seconds. Bob, breathe, sink. A single breath stolen at the surface before she vanished again without splash or struggle, like a ghost returning to her element. Panic kills faster than cold water ever could. Above, expedition members shifted restlessly on the ice. The surface was too calm, too controlled. "She should be up by now," Rivers whispered. Another team member laughed weakly, but the sound carried no conviction. "She's done for sure." But the words hung empty in the frigid air. The stillness stretched like a wire under tension, ready to snap with explosive force. At the bottom of the devil's pool, Maya bent her knees, ankles grinding against the coarse climbing rope. The knot was a mountaineer's double wrap, designed to tighten under pressure and hold until death. To most, it was an unbreakable prison that only grew stronger with struggle. But Maya understood rope dynamics better than most. If the outer loop could be manipulated just right, it would create a gap, not freedom, but possibility. And possibility was everything. She pressed her ankles together, flexing and twisting, toes clawed back, heels forced outward in micro-movements, so controlled and precise they were almost surgical. Applied force at the knot's weakest structural point. Rope fibers bit into her skin through her thermal suit. Pain flared like fire, but the burn of flesh tearing confirmed the fibers were shifting, responding to her technique. Above, Frost's confident smirk wavered like ice beginning to crack. He had witnessed the ice cave challenge break Olympic swimmers, professional rescue divers, hardened special forces operators. They always panicked, always betrayed themselves with desperate thrashing. But here, the pool remained silent, unbroken as black glass. Even the constant mountain wind seemed to pause in anticipation. Then it happened. A subtle shudder through the rope's structure. Maya felt it more than saw it, a vibration that spoke of weakening fibers and shifting tension. The outer loop slipped exactly one crucial notch. Pressure distribution changed, became uneven. A gap opened, like a door cracked in absolute darkness. Her lungs screamed for oxygen, but she forced herself to work methodically. Dragging her bound ankles closer to her imprisoned hands, fingers scraped blind across rough fiber, knuckles shredding against the rope's abraded surface. At first, only her fingertips could hook the gap. She bobbed upward, stole a precious sip of air, then sank again with renewed determination. Next cycle, a full knuckle wedged into the opening. Another breath, another dive, another increment of progress. This time, her entire hand drove deep into the gap, twisting and prying with raw determination born of absolute necessity. Blood ribboned into the crystal-clear water like red ink, but she never hesitated. Rope groaned under the strain, then, snap. The outer loop tore loose with the sound of breaking chains. One leg kicked free, then both. Gasps exploded through the line of expedition members like grenades detonating. "No way in hell!" someone hissed in disbelief. Another cursed under his breath, the words echoing off ice walls. Frost's arms dropped to his sides, face draining of color faster than Arctic wind could steal heat. Storm's stylus paused mid-stroke, his granite jaw tightening with something approaching recognition. Maya didn't waste time celebrating the small victory. She curled like a knife through water, driving diagonally toward the pool's edge with powerful strokes. Her free foot hooked a submerged ice ladder rung, anchoring her body as momentum carried her forward. Hips, chest, and shoulders slammed against the cavern wall with bone-jarring force. With one violent rolling motion, she spilled out of the devil's pool like vengeance taking physical form. She collapsed onto the ice shelf, crystalline water pouring off her thermal suit in silver torrents, wrists still bound behind her back, but breathing steady and controlled. She had pulled herself out alone, without assistance, without rescue, without surrender. Silence descended heavier than an avalanche. Every expedition member stared as their earlier laughter died in their throats, like something they desperately wanted to deny. They had expected thrashing, a limp body requiring emergency extraction. Instead, they had witnessed someone systematically dismantle the impossible, breath by calculated breath. Rising to half-kneeling, soaked but unbroken, Maya scanned their faces with eyes hard as mountain granite. She watched their expressions transform, sneers melting into unease, confidence hollowing into doubt, like ice caves carved by persistent water. Frost stepped forward, fists clenched, but explanations died on his tongue. He had no framework for comprehending what they had just witnessed. At the cavern's far end, Storm finally moved. He leaned toward his communication device, voice low and clinical, delivering a verdict rather than an observation. Glacier protocol observed. Identity confirmation pending verification. Nobody else heard the transmission, but they all saw her, and in that crystalline silence, every person on that ice shelf realized what terrified them most. It wasn't that she had survived what should have killed her. It was that she had done it with surgical control, methodical precision, like someone who had been in this exact situation before and was clearly far from finished. Maya burst from the water like an ice-breaking missile, bound arms still pinned behind her back, but legs free, and driving her upward with explosive power that defied human limitations. She landed chest first against the pool wall, pressed her boots to the ice-slick surface, and used pure momentum to vault clear of the water in one fluid motion. She stood dripping on the shelf, rope fragments dangling from one ankle, face expressionless as carved stone, LED floods carving shadows across her shoulders and transforming water droplets into liquid diamonds. The expedition formation froze completely. For 3 punishing weeks they had mocked, dismissed, and ridiculed her. Now, she stood, breathing steadily, as if she had just completed a warm-up drill instead of one of the most lethal survival tests in extreme sports training. Instructor Kane Frost's mouth opened, but words refused to emerge. He had supervised ice cave challenges before, witnessed survivors and casualties, but never anything like this. Never with such precision, never with such absolute control. Then Maya did something that shattered their reality completely. Still bound, she bent forward and calmly rolled her shoulders until the rope binding her wrists snapped against her hip like breaking steel cable. The fibers split with a sound like rifle fire. She brought her hands forward, shook free of the wet cord, and let it drop at her feet. The sound of rope hitting ice was louder than thunder in the cavern's acoustic chamber. Gasps shattered the silence like breaking glass. One expedition member whispered, "Impossible." Another muttered, "Nobody does that. Nobody." Colonel Rex Storm didn't look surprised. He stepped forward, boots deliberate against the ice shelf, tablet in one hand, authority radiating from every movement. His voice cut through the cavern with military precision. Glacier protocol, verified and confirmed. The expedition team stared in complete confusion. The words meant nothing to their civilian understanding, but the weight of Storm's tone, the precision of his bearing made the message crystal clear. He wasn't addressing a trainee. He was addressing someone who outranked him. Maya returned his gaze with eyes hard as mountain granite. For the first time in weeks, her posture shifted fundamentally. The careful awkwardness melted away like spring thaw. Shoulders squared, chin raised, the unmistakable presence of command radiating from her, like heat from volcanic stone. Storm snapped to perfect attention and delivered a crisp salute. "Colonel Maya Chen. Evaluation complete and successful." The cavern erupted in whispers that echoed off ice walls like ghostly voices. Colonel, the recruit they had ridiculed, dismissed as inexperienced, was their superior officer all along. Frost staggered forward, face twisting with rage that burned hotter than Arctic wind. "This is a setup. She manipulated us. She cheated the entire challenge." Maya turned her head slowly, eyes cutting into him with surgical precision that could split granite. Her voice emerged low, calm, absolutely lethal. "If weakness is sufficient to provoke abuse, instructor, then you are unfit to lead anyone, anywhere, ever." Frost froze as his fury shattered against the steel edge of her words like ice against stone. Storm's voice cracked like breaking glaciers. "Instructor Kane Frost, effective immediately. You are suspended from all training authority. Report to Base Command Headquarters now." The order landed with crushing finality, stripping away the last remnants of Frost's authority. He hesitated, jaw clenched, then shoved past Maya toward the cavern exit, boots scraping against ice, but not before she leaned close enough for only him to hear. "It ended the moment you confused cruelty with strength." His steps faltered. He didn't look back. The expedition members stood rigid, uncertain whether to salute, speak, or simply disappear into the mountain wilderness. Their world had been completely inverted in a single afternoon of revelation. Maya swept her gaze across the formation, no longer empty or hidden. Every glance pinned someone in place, reminding them of every laugh, every jeer, every whispered insult, when they believed no one important was listening. She said nothing more. The silence carried more power than any speech could deliver. Storm turned toward the stunned assembly, his voice detonating across the ice chamber. "Attention! You are in the presence of Colonel Maya Chen, decorated combat operative, former Shadow Mountain Division officer, and your new commanding officer. You will treat her accordingly." The words exploded across the cavern like controlled demolitions. Some expedition members flinched, others stared pale and speechless. A handful straightened instinctively, recognizing true authority when it stood before them in flesh and blood. Maya allowed the weight of revelation to settle like snow, accumulating on mountain peaks. Every second of humiliation, every whispered insult had been calculated elements of the test. Now the real evaluation was beginning, because survival was never the final measure. Character was everything. She stepped forward, ice water dripping onto the frozen cavern floor, and locked eyes with the formation. "I have observed you for 21 days, she said, voice steady as mountain bedrock. Each syllable sharp as glacier ice. Not your climbing skills, not your endurance times, your character. How you treat those you believed powerless. Gasps rippled through the line like seismic tremors. Faces went pale as realization cut deep. Their real test hadn't been obstacle courses or survival challenges. It had been her, watching, measuring, evaluating. Before anyone could process fully, she raised one hand, pointing at 3 expedition members. You, and you. He chosen froze, uncertain why they had been selected. The others held their breath like divers preparing for deep water. Storm made another notation on his tablet, lips pressed into a line, thin as knife steel. He knew exactly what was coming next. So did Maya. The challenge was over. The true reckoning had just begun. The expedition members stood frozen as mountain wind whistled through the cavern entrance, tugging at their gear as if even the air refused to break the crystalline silence. Maya-chan allowed the moment to stretch, each second pressing down with weight no physical training could prepare them for. Then she stepped forward, boots whispering against the ice shelf. I didn't come here to measure how fast you could climb or how far you could trek, she said, voice cutting through the cavern like an ice axe through granite. I came to discover who you are when you believe no one important is watching. Eyes flickered across the ranks. Some hardened in defiance, others dropped in shame. Everyone remembered their laughter, the way they had turned away when she fell, when they assumed she was too weak to rise. Maya's gaze locked on the 3 expedition members she had selected. Specialist Maria Santos, who had shared her emergency rations with a teammate when no one else would. Corporal David Kim, who had quietly defended another member during brutal night training. Private Alex Rivers, who had prioritized team success over personal glory during navigation exercises. You 3 demonstrated the quality extreme operations actually demands, she said, tone firm but not unkind. Courage without recognition, loyalty without reward, leadership without requiring titles or authority. The rest of the formation shifted uncomfortably, ice crunching under boots. For the first time, they began to understand this wasn't about being fastest or strongest. It was about who could carry power without abusing it. Maya crouched slowly, fingers digging into the cavern's ice-covered floor. She lifted a handful of crystalline fragments, watching them melt and drip between her knuckles, disappearing like tears in the mountain cold. The mountain doesn't care who you are, she said, watching the last ice crystals fall. Doesn't care where you came from, or what achievements define your past. The mountain asks only one question. When it throws you down, will you rise? The words settled heavy as avalanche snow. Expedition members shifted restlessly, the shame of their laughter now carved into their posture like scars. Several swallowed hard, the lesson cutting deeper than any blade or bullet ever could. Maya straightened, brushing her palms together with finality. Most of you failed that test, and that's not punishment, it's direction. Some will serve elsewhere, and perhaps someday you'll discover what true strength means. But those who remain, she turned back to the 3, will begin advanced training under my command. I will push you harder than Instructor Frost ever imagined possible, but I will never humiliate you to prove my power, because power that requires breaking others to exist is weakness masquerading as strength. Colonel Storm closed his tablet with a sharp click, nodding once. The evaluation was complete, but transformation had only begun. Maya scanned their faces one final time, LED lights gleaming off her expedition badges, ice water still dripping from her gear. But it was her presence, authority earned, not demanded, that filled the cavern with electric tension. Want to understand the difference between cruelty and leadership? She asked quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the crystalline air. Cruelty breaks people down to make itself feel taller. Leadership builds people up until they discover they can stand taller than they ever imagined possible. Silence. Then, slowly, one expedition member, at the formation's far end, shifted to attention. Another followed. Within moments, the entire group snapped upright, not in fear, not in shame, but in respect that was genuine and earned. For the first time, they weren't looking at a weak recruit, they were looking at a leader. Maya let the silence linger like mountain echoes, then turned to Storm, dismissed. As the formation broke apart, her words continued to hang in the cavern's frigid air, heavy enough to outlast the expedition, the season, perhaps the lifetime. True strength isn't proven by how many you can break. It's proven by how many you refuse to let fall.